Hello guys, this is your friend Dark Fox 3.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto married Temari, the Kazekage's queen, in the beginning of a Forbidden Harem Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button, check description and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Hurrah for the Uchiha! The people of Konoha shouted as they celebrated the union of Haruno Sakura, now known as Mrs. Uchiha Sakura, to Uchiha Sasuke. The people of Konoha were thrilled to have such a great occasion to celebrate, for there had been few reasons to celebrate as in the past few days. They had always viewed the Uchiha as their hope and joy, while they viewed the Uzumaki as something of a burden that they should never have accepted long ago, despite the fact that it was this cursed child who defended them from any other external threat to them who hated him. Be that the case, not all of the people were in agreement on that. Especially the nins, who are part of the nin force of Konoha. Among the older and some of the younger shinobis preferred to have the blonde nin in charge than anyone else. They were the ones who were at the front and with him on the field. They had seen the greatness of Naruto's soul and how he touched the lives of others and gave them direction. What made the situation worse was that or nins of their force had been lost too when they had lost Naruto. They had lost Yuhi Kurenai, the most beautiful woman in Konoha, next to the Gondime Hokage and Yumino Iruka, one of the academy's finest teachers. Both of them were lost in an attempt to contact Naruto during a betrayed mission. Sabaku no Temari was not a leaf nin, but sand nins and leaf nins were now considered allies, therefore one treated each other with respect, if not camaraderie. The sibling of Gaara was kidnapped during her stay in the sand village by traitorous sand nins. The Kazekage at once ordered the sand nins to find his sister. While the sand nins scoured every place they could, Naruto and his team composed of Sasuke and Neji were ordered to bring a package to the village of the mist. Sasuke and Neji, however, were given secret orders to kill Naruto if he ever discovered the contents of the package and decide to cancel the mission. The council's explanation was that the package was of extreme diplomatic importance to Konoha. It was important that the package arrive in the village of the mist with or without the team leader. Despite his reluctance he agreed, but Sasuke with no trace of regret agreed. The mission went well at first, with nothing more than a few encounters with bandits and thieves, who were trying to take the package. One day, however, the blonde Junin suddenly heard a dog bark, but not at the horse and carriage that carried the package, but at the package itself. He knew that dogs could sense both people and danger. Curious, he opened the package and then was shocked at what he saw. For inside the package was Sabaku no Temari, who was asleep from a very strong potion. She was at that time already a bit thin from not having eaten for 2 whole days already. Naruto, as the nins knew, was someone with integrity and honesty. He knew the moment he saw Temari that the mission was nothing more than a cover-up for some trumped-up scheme to make the sand and the leaf fight each other. He gave Temari some food when he woke her up from her slumber, knowing how hungry the woman would be after not being able to eat for nearly 2 days. Naruto sat beside her and watched her as she ate, while he himself contemplated on how he would explain to his teammates what was happening and convince them to double back to Konoha and explain everything to the Hokage. When he saw that Neji and Sasuke were coming back after the recon mission he had sent them on a few minutes ago, he was unaware of the orders the two of them were given as the 2 nins got close to him. Neji dreaded this situation. He silently prayed that Naruto would not find out about the package, but there he was sitting with their package. He then began to feel pity. He did not want Naruto to die. They were friends and to kill was something he found difficult to do, but Sasuke scolded him for that when he told Sasuke what he was feeling. The Uchiha reasoned that it was for Konoha, the same place that the order came from. If they disobeyed Konoha and its orders, they would betray their ideals and dreams. With that reasoning, Neji agreed, but reluctantly. He may follow the order, but that didn't mean that he would have to like the order. With a sign of regret, he moved with his kunai to attack, only to be thrown back by another kunai thrown from above the tree by a certain scarred Chunin with a red-eyed Junin. Had it not been for the kunai of Iruka, who, along with Kurenai, was sent to warn Naruto of the council's treachery, Naruto would have been dead on the spot if not for Iruka's kunai. With great effort Iruka and Kurenai tried to convince them that the council had betrayed them, but HT2 nin were steadfast in their orders. With no other choice the three nins fought. Secretly Neji and Sasuke were also ordered to eliminate whatever was in the box, so they chose to have the blood of their three fellow nins and one sand nin on their hand. After Sasuke had separated Naruto from the rest, Neji managed to send Kurenai over the cliff while they were fighting. Iruka saw this and jumped in to save her with no thought for his safety. Temari herself was ready to fight, but was shocked to what she would see as she heard the sound of birds chirping louder and louder. After a few seconds she saw a bond blur and a blue one as the blonde one came in front of her. While the blue one collided with it, she saw blood, the blood of Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto came in front of her to block the Chidori that Sasuke had unleashed with the intent to kill her. When he managed to get up, he noticed that there was no way for him to fight them. That was when he spotted the cliff that helped him form a new Ided. Seeing that there was no way for him to win since he was injured and Temari was unarmed. With a hole in his arm and an unarmed Temari, he decided the next best thing. He jumped off the cliff. A few hours later, both Sasuke and Neji were shocked at the news that they would get in Konoha. They were informed once they returned about the council's betrayal. By then it was already too late, for in their hands Sasuke and Neji held the head protectors of all the four shinobis. They had collected it once they went below the cliff to inspect the bodies of the four nins, and having found only blood and some traces of hair, they assumed that they had been dragged by the water currents of the river below the cliff to their deaths. This aftermath of the incident caused the brutal execution of several of the guilty people, while the others were tortured in secret by the Kazekage after he learned of their identities. An act that the Gondame of Konoha claimed she didn't know about. Neji himself went into a self-proclaimed exile for the next 2 years and went on a road of repentance, which led him to separate himself from any other relationship with any other person. This resulted in him being single until now and almost completely silent and antisocial. Sasuke, however, took it better than he did. He was unable to face Sakura, who was supposed to have married Naruto, but left him hanging in the altar. The pink-haired woman cried for the death of her would-have-been husband. However, she was not meant to be alone her entire life, as Uchiha Sasuke began to befriend Sakura, and with his help they became lovers and now a couple. With the help of their friends and ardent believers, they were now living a happy life. What I read most of the other nins was that if it had been Naruto in Sasuke's shoes, they would never done anything to help him. All that they could do now was live for the sake of their friend and comrade in arms. Uzumaki Naruto was to continue to serve Konoha with honesty and courage that nobody else in this world would have had. Their feelings, however, were not alone, since it was shared by someone else in the crowd. Man, I miss both those idiots, Tsunade thought as she took a sip of her sake. The Gondame of Konoha was musing over the loss of two of her closest people to her. One was gone possibly forever, while another had decided to live in another village for the past 5 years. In truth, she was already having some trouble with the day-to-day handling of the village. There were constant aggression between villages and the dropping economy. These two factors lessened her support from both internally and outside of Konoha. Without her most eager supporters and fans, she was finding it harder to get things done. Naruto, for some, was nothing more than an ordinary shinobi, but that was all talk. When it came down to business, very few actually came close to Naruto and Jiraiya's works. Most importantly, those two were the most ardent supporters of her administration, in which they championed her at every turn. At that Tsunade's side, she needed someone to champion her cause. Especially if council she was planning were to happen or take effect. She needed a village where all of the shinobi village's leaders could assemble and meet with no apprehension or doubt. There was far too much aggression among other villagers, and other old feuds between villages were resurfacing or were intensifying. What's more, very few villages seemed to prosper with the constant fighting and the economic decline. She suddenly stopped as she saw Anko approach her. "Tsunade-sama, I must speak with you in private," Anko said to Tsunade, who agreed and followed her away from the gathering to a location behind a tree. Tsunade knew how much Anko had secretly adored Iruka, but never had the heart to commit like Sakura to her love. She instead chose a life that she was used to living, single and alone, with no boyfriend. She existed. That was said if the Gondame thought about how much she needed someone knowing her past, but out of respect for the Junin she never told her to do otherwise. Pushing away those old and rather unwanted memories, Tsunafe listened to Anko's report. She wondered why Anko had handed her a scroll under a tree. It was until she gave her report that the blonde Hokage understood. Tsunade-sama, please proceed to the market area. We have found someone there who we know you would like to meet. This seeing as you and him had not seen each other for some time. Anko said as she handed a scroll to Tsunade, who accepted it and read. A second later she ran towards the market area where a white-haired man shouted as he found what he was looking for. Yata! Jiraiya shouted as he looked at a beautiful silver ring and an equally beautiful silver necklace. The silver ring had the design of the oak leaves swirling around it, while the necklace had the design of a dove holding a design of an angel. Jiraiya snickered at his luck and congratulated himself on thinking about coming back to Konoha even if it was temporary. After Jiraiya bought the two items, he went off to sit the barbecue place where he decided to rest. Waiter, 1 bottle of sake and an order of pork for the barbecue please. Jiraiya said as he watched the view from the balcony second floor of the restaurant. Nothing much had changed except how it felt in Konoha. It had been years, so he was not there when his old village changed. Nevertheless, he remembered what it was at that time. Despite that there was war during that time, Konoha felt like it was secure and safe. But now there was a sense of desperation in the air as he breathed it, only to smell a familiar trace of a sweet scent of a woman he had loved a long time ago. Sighing, he greeted the woman. Hello Tsunade. Jiraiya said as the well-endowed woman arrived carrying his order. She smiled as she sat down to talk to her longtime friend Jiraiya. She missed the day where they would always fight about things and then be friends later on. He was after all one of the most trustworthy people of Konoha. Tsunade decided to interview him a bit and then talk to him about something. She didn't want to ruin her chances at getting what she needed from the old pervert. He might be pervert, but he was a resourceful and useful one. So, what brings you here? Ran out of girls to peep on for those perverted books of yours? Tsunade asked as she took a glass of sake from the table while a peeved Jiraiya was staring at her with a fake smile. What? That swindling blonde wants a favor and I've just seen her after at least 5 years when I left to search for Naruto. Jiraiya shouted mentally to himself as he placed a fake smile. For all of his faults, Jiraiya was not stupid. He knew what Tsunade's plan was. She wanted to ask him a great favor, so that was why she was being so nice to him. He decided to play along since it amused him to think that Tsunade had him under her spell. What brings the First Lady of Konoha in front of this common man during his time of shopping for something that only he values? Jiraiya said while he also congratulated himself for storing the items he had bought in a scroll for safekeeping while he hid the scroll itself in his inner trench coat pocket. He didn't want too many questions asked. Tsunade smiled as she surveyed her old friend's clothing and demeanor. First, there was something with the clothes. The frog hermit changed from his old clothes to wearing a black trench coat that seemed to cover his body and had buttons on the left side of high chest. Think of the trench coat of Nemesis in Resident Evil. This was not what the perverted man usually wore. He was more or less someone who did not wear black. He also had gloves on his hand, and heavy boots meant that he was either from someplace cold or someplace that had lots of rain. Jiraiya noticed her staring at his clothes and spoke. I need this for my work as an advisor to a village. Jiraiya said, hoping to pinpoint what Tsunade wanted, and judging by the sudden smile she had, he found out he was right. He waited for her to speak as he placed some meat on the grill. Excellent. Although I am bothered by the fact that Jiraiya is playing advisor to another village, but this could work out well for us. Especially if he works for the newest village I have heard about, Tsunade thought as she remembered the only new village that still had to make some enemies. The village of the Tenshi, or the village of angels as some called the place, which was taken from their head protectors, which had 2 wings on it and was commonly found taking in village-less clans. She had a chance, but then she needed to take a risk if she was to put her plan in motion. "May I ask which village are you corrupting the youth now, Jiraiya?" Tsunade asked as she placed a piece of meat on the grill. Jiraiya answered he took a piece of meat and ate it. Tsunade smiled at Jiraiya's answer. "The village of angels," Jiraiya answered as Tsunade's grin grew. "Jiraiya, I have a plan and I need for you and your village to be a part of it," Tsunade said. Jiraiya listened to her plan while someone else in the village of sand had gotten a scroll of Tsunade's plan from an emissary she had sent to the village. They were after allies. "Her plan is good and bad," Gaara said as he read the plan from the balcony of the Kazekage's building. He had just finished reading the full version of Tsunade's plan. The female Kage planned to invite the leaders of all of the shinobi villages to help put a stop to the constant bickering between each other. The Kazekage wondered also if the meeting would not inspire new problems and feuds. It was hard to unite villages, but it was even more difficult to prevent new feuds and problems from arising. Gaara continued to think as Baki, one of the members of the council, decided to speak up. "What do you think of this one, Kazekage-sama?" Baki said as he and the Kage had a conversation. "What she hopes to achieve is unity, but I fear that instead of unity it may bring discord. The villages will not bond that easily and sudden declaration of wars between lords would then fuel wars and fighting all over again," Gaara said, retaining his expressionless face. "True, but then she must be in need of new supporters for her village," Baki said, making Gaara agree. "True, she does not seek a permanent solution. She just wants to make sure that the fighting is no longer the intentional," Gaara said in agreement with Baki. The Junin himself was curious to the Kage's opinion. "So what is the reason for her to ask then?" Baki asked as a short silence appeared. It was only broken when Gaara spoke. "If she can at least guarantee some sort of stability, the economies of the villages will grow, and remember, Konoha, like most of the other villages, were expecting a sudden drop in the economy," Gaara said, remembering one of the most common principles in economics that was taught to him years ago by a friend who had helped him years ago. A stable environment gives room for growth," Baki said as he added something that plagued him since the Kage mentioned the village gathering with their old feuds and rivalries still in effect. "Kazekage Dono, since you mentioned the bitterness between villages, I was wondering something," the Junin began while Gaara just retained his composure and looked at him. "Very well, what troubles you?" Gaara said as he looked at Baki, who still had his head down. "Where will they gather without the risk of blood being shed?" Baki asked as the Kazekage smiled for the first time in a very long time as he answered. "Village of the Tenshi?" a thick-eyebrow Junin asked while Tsunade announced her plan to the entire village of Konoha. "Yes, Lee. I believe it translates to Village of the Angels," Guy said, lacking the usual fire in his voice. He was not as spirited in his work when he heard of Naruto's betrayal. In a way, he had admired the boy and how he managed to get over things and live. There were very few people who could live that long and still maintain their sanity. In a way, he had become some sort of inspiration for the younger generation not to give up and become the basis of several younger nins, as noted by their hard-headed determination. He was then addressed by Tenten. "Nay, Guy-sensei. What kind village is that?" "Neji," Tenten asked as Neji remained quiet. The rest just sighed. They had tried to get Neji to speak, but there was no hint of him saying even the word no or yes. As they sat in the tea shop, they wondered what kind of village it was. They, like many of the other nins, had no idea about what kind of village the Tenshi was. It was a relatively new village, so no data on it was ever discovered. That was until the Suna ambassador spoke. The village of the Tenshi is a village specially created during the days when the sound was destroyed. For 2 years the village was hidden from everyone until representatives from the sand were allowed in. They became one of the sources of food for the sand and became the connection of the sand with other countries, since it was located near a couple of villages and was one of the safest and shortest routes due to the Sound and Tenshi War that miraculously lasted only a few months, since the Otokage had a severed depletion due to an incident with the supplies and the civilians which they needed to fuel their war effort. Thus, with their supplies gone and their own villagers against them, the Sound fell, but not at the cost of numerous lives, especially on the side of the Sound. For some unknown reason, the Mist was hesitant to declare war on them despite their earlier situation as a weak village. Kankuro said as Guy's team turned to look at him. They smiled as they allowed the Sand Ambassador to seat near them. Physically, Kankuro had not changed. He still wore the same clothes like he usually did. Very little of his physical appearance actually did change. Most of the change was inward, like Neji, who suddenly became silent as a tomb. The only difference with Kankuro was that he had his hood down, which revealed his short blonde hair, which reminded them of Naruto. This caused Neji to ignore him as he did the rest while spoke. He was not ready to have people trust him. Guy sighed as the Sand Ambassador spoke. So what else can you tell us about the Tenchi? Tenten asked as she held a glass of sake. Tenten had retained her Chinese outfit and her buns, but she changed into beautiful woman over the years. Yash, I wish to learn of this magnificent and strong village, Lee said as the carbon copy of Guy made everyone sweat drop as Kankuro just frowned. That's the problem. You see, Gaara is the only one outside the Tenshikage, and members of the village can offer or allow you entrance to the village. Basically, I have never been sent into that village. Gaara is the only one of the Sand outside from a few Junins that has actually entered the village. You'd think they were raising the dead there or something, Kankuro said as the Sand Ambassador in order to talk with the Konoha Nin when someone spoke, drawing people's attention. Don't go spreading things like that, Kankuro-san. It is unprofessional of an ambassador to do such a thing, Jiraiya said as he walked inside the restaurant while he wore his black trench coat as he walked past a vendor on the street. The Toad Sannin ignored the cheers and smile he got from the people who were excited at the return of their Sannin. The Nins noticed this and became curious. Jiraiya-sama, one must be honest in expressing one's thoughts. Nay? Kankuro said as the former frog hermit just smiled and answered with a lesson he had taught his students before, including Naruto from his past as a sensei. Sometimes we too must be careful in what we say, for the truth will act like a poisoned kunai, destroying the trace of friendship and trust between people. Honesty and gentleness work hand in hand. We need to help them grow and not put people down, Jiraiya said as the Kankuro just kept a fake smile while the others just maintained their curious faces. Damn you, you old toad, Kankuro thought as he wanted to know what Jiraiya wanted to say and ask of him. Thank you for the kind reminder, Jayadono. What however brings you here? Kankuro said as the silver-haired Nin sat down next to him and ordered a bottle of sake. The Nin took a sip and spoke to him. I need your team to escort me to the Tenchi, Jiraiya said as he looked at Guy, who suddenly went into a shocked face. The others, however, were wondering why he had chosen them. Jiraiya-sama, why don't you take Uchiha team instead of? A Junin said as Jiraiya crushed the sake glass in his hands and suddenly spoke, but he did not shout. He was far too good in controlling his emotional outbursts thanks to his new life. The plan is dependent on this village that we are going to. I will not let he plan go to waste just because some pathetic nin suggested such a pathetic advice. Understood? Jiraiya said, visible trying to stop himself from strangling the nin. The other nins were shocked, but they just stood in place and made no move as the man spoke to clear things up. He didn't want to ruin the chance of this plan being put into action. Even his village needed this plan. Guy's team is one of the teams that is recognized by both me and the Kazekage with the authority to enter. Kakashi's team is on the blacklist of the Tenchi for several purposes. Sasuke is still in danger from Orochimaru. They lack a team member, and that the Sharingan's reputation as a technique copier is all too popular, Jiraiya said as he sat there not looking at the rest of the nins when a lazy voice spoke from behind. So Guy's team is the safer choice then? A lazy voice said, causing Jiraiya's eyes to narrow. The older Konoha shinobis began to worry. Ever since Naruto had been betrayed and killed by Sasuke, the two nins were at odds with each other. They hoped that it wouldn't become violent. The two of them were the best nins of Konoha, and it would be a disaster if they fought. That is just one of the reasons, Kakashi. There are other reasons, but that is between me and the other higher members of the Tenchi. Tsunade has asked me to assemble a team that would escort me to the Tenchi. She wants to ensure that I arrived safely. I don't need to stress the importance of this mission to Konoha's future," Jiraiya said as he looked at Neji. He still refused to look at the silver-haired nin. Kakashi, however, was not convinced as the former Icha Paradise fan risked coming closer. Guy merely had a disappointed look on his face knowing what had happened to his old friend. In the years where they taught both Naruto and Lee, the lazy nin was one of the most calm and precise nins, but now the nin was facing one thing that had been plaguing him forever since the death of Obito: regret. A bigger regret came when Naruto defeated Shiori and rescued Sasuke with skills that he never learned from him. He never taught Naruto anything. He didn't believe that he was responsible enough or good enough. Guy could only imagine the surprise on his face when he found out what Naruto was capable of when they gave him the chance. He understood he wanted Sasuke to be the nin that he hoped him to become, but the incident with Orochimaru sealed the young Uchiha's fate. They would not trust him with anything anymore. There was no way that they would give him the power that Kakashi wanted for him. Kakashi, Sasuke is not good enough to be trusted with this kind of thing. You of all people should know that. If you him force, he will become a missing nin like Itachi," Jiraiya said as he left. He knew Tsunade would fill them up later, so he left them with unanswered questions. While Kakashi stopped from walking and stood there as everyone ignored him except an old friend that looked on him with pity. None of them noticed a man who was selling some trinkets disappear. While somewhere else someone was having a meeting of their own. "You will take a group of sound Junins and then attack Jiraiya, who my spies report is in Konoha right now. They have also reported Tsunade's plan that she announced in the PA system. I have expected this. She needs to announce it to the people to avoid sudden inquiries as to what she was doing if she suddenly left for whatever village they are going to, or why people from other villages were suddenly arriving. A foolish, but a necessary move on her part. Jiraiya is probably acting as the ambassador for the leaf to the village. If they unite, then we will have no room to take power from another village." A slithering voice said 20 gray-clothed nins were bowing before him. Each of them wore a sound headband. At once Orochimaru-sama, the Junin leader, said as he disappeared with his team. "You will not have peace, O Tenshikage. Ha 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 ha." Orochimaru laughed wickedly from his hidden fortress. "When we are alive, people are often complaining about what they have. They can't even be content in what they have, while some were in misery with their family. Each of them has a dream of experiencing the good life for the sake of their families, which was a direct opposite to what kind of life they are leading just now." One such young woman had brown hair that was in a ponytail and was walking towards a village with her 4-year-old daughter and contemplating on the miseries in her life and clan. Their lives and the life of their clan was not an easy. They needed a home to live in and not in a forest where they had a hard time living. This was the reason for her mission to this village. "Haifa. This life sucks," Kasumi said as she thought about her life in her clan while she was walking towards the village where she was sent. The life she had led with her clan for the past years of her life was not an easy one. Her clan had been in exile for over 2 decades, which meant that she was born when they were in exile, but she had been told about their life before the exile of her clan by her mother, and she could only wonder if those times will ever come back again. A long time ago, her clan was one of the most powerful and influential clans of the Cloud. Their current leader explained the history of their clan to them, since he was one of the oldest members of the clan. Their current leader was the old head of the Cloud Anbu squad. During the old times, according to him, they were able to make a name for themselves and become one of the feared clans of the Cloud. But this also made them lots of enemies that somehow united against them and waited when the time was right to strike. While they did not strike grievous wounds to the clan, they did their best to scatter some of the other clan members with false charges and planted evidences that helped exile them. One day, however, one of clan families that were exiled helped save the clan from complete banishment from their home. That clan member was a man known only as the Yondaime of Konoha, the leader of one of the most powerful villages of Konoha. While the Yondaime reigned in Konoha, his clan was an instrumental figure in creating peace between the village of Konoha and village of the Cloud. In this time they were saved from exile due to the importance of the clan to the Cloud. No one wanted war, and it was only through her clan that they could at least assure peace for their village. This newfound importance of her clan angered their enemies and only fueled them in their drive to get rid of her clan. Then one day, their time of power faded as a terrible tragedy befell the clan. It was a disaster that marked the end of their clan's power in the Cloud and their influence with the Leaf. It was the day that the Yondaime of Konoha perished, and with his death the decline of her clan's power. When the Yondaime died, the usefulness of her clan died out. From being one of the most respected and the most needed, they were brought down to a lower post, but it did not end there. Sometime later, a member of the clan was charged with treason after helping an injured Nukenin escape during a mission. This would have turned the own person's clan against him had he not told his story. According to the Nin, they were ordered to hunt down a group of Nukenins in that area, and as a member of the Hunter Nin squad he joined immediately. When they arrived in the designated area, they quietly and quickly took out 2 of the 3 missing Nins while the 2 were shopping for their comrades while in a henge. The other 3 had been hiding in a forest besides a farm which apparently one of them owned. The Hunter Nins chased and baited them into coming out. The accused shinobi was ordered to take out one of the 3. Inside the house, and being dutiful Nin, he entered with the intent to kill his target. Inside, however, his choice would seal his fate. Inside he fought the Nin, which he defeated and was about to kill when a little girl came out screaming, "Daddy!" Kasumi pitied the man once she heard his story, for the little girl had thrown herself before him and his newly arrived comrade and the Nukenin, who had an injury to his leg preventing him from moving. This was all he needed to change his decision. Ignoring the protest of his fellow Nin, who he knocked unconscious, he ordered the Nukenin to go and take his family with him, earning him the entire family's gratitude. Sometime later they were banished from the Cloud, and although some of the younger generations were angry, the elders who understood how the Nin felt explained that it would have happened anyways. How right those old men were. Kasumi thought as her father's memories played into her mind. She could see the old clan head give an explanation. This was nothing more than an excuse. We are already hated in the Cloud. It was only a matter of time before they had us exiled, some ridiculously made-up charge. They needed a scapegoat and we became the goats. Do not blame Ken, for he does us proud. We are a clan that believes in honesty, integrity and hope. For us there is only what one wants to do and what one does not want to do. This is who we are. Kasumi remembered, thanks to her father's constant reminder of that lecture he received with some of the other younger generation of their clan. "Mama!" the little girl shouted as she pointed to a gate which was colored black and was guarded by 2 chunins with the symbol of the tenshi on their foreheads. The woman shouted for joy while waving at the 2 shinobis who were at the gate and looking at her like one would look at a madwoman. Who the hell is this woman? Hiryo thought as he and his partner were looked at the brown-haired woman who approached them. It had been their turn on guard duty, so naturally they were not pleased. But their annoyance with their duty was replaced with the suddenly alertness at a possible enemy. Unknown to them, something the woman would say in answer to their question would take their sanities from them. "Who are you and what is your business here in the Tenshi village?" Ryo asked. The woman stood in front of him smiling while Hei readied themselves for any sign of trouble. If anyone tried to attack their home, they would face death before they even tried to reach their leader's home. What they heard instead was something that would shock them to the core of their being. "I am Uzumaki Kasumi, and this little girl beside me is my daughter Uzumaki Mihoshi. We are here in behalf of the clan Uzumaki to request for asylum and acceptance into your village from you leader, the Tenshikage," Kasumi said as she tried to hold her giggles as Hiryo then fainted to the ground. This made little Mihoshi giggle as she soon found it fun to poke the man in the face as he laid there on the ground, and was more pleased when the second chunin too fainted with a flop as her mother began laughing hysterically. While somewhere a young Kage and newly declared Kage was signing a bunch of papers while he felt suddenly as if somebody was laughing at him. "Why do I get a feeling I'm going to be seeing something that will shock me soon?" the Tenshikage thought as he heard the laughter from the gate. He thanked the kami for that distraction from paperwork and then resumed with the work that was a shinobi leader's bane, the paperwork. That was until someone came to inform him on why there was laughter, and from there on then he fainted into dreamland. The teams and their lives. A journey begins, so does a story. It was bad day for Hyuga Hiyashi, who was seeing his nephew Neji off before the young Hyuga began his mission. He was concerned for his nephew. He had taken upon himself to protect and take care of his troubled nephew ever since his father's death. Yet, here he was watching him waste away with his sorrow. His lips turned to a frown as he blamed the council traitors. Yes, he, like most of the newly created council, did not view the entire situation of the village or the people as Naruto's fault. He, like the new council, knew that there was nothing the blonde could do but write out what had happened. He could not say, however, for his fellow villagers. For him it was a disappointment to see the entire village in such hateful stature. The blonde was innocent in all of this, and the entire thing was the fault of the council that had betrayed him. Although he did not want to admit it, he could not help this thought. It seems Konoha is not worth the innocent boy's life, Hiyashi thought as he looked at his nephew. To him, there was one of the people who could not be blamed for the incident. He was sure wherever Naruto was, the kind blonde Junin had already forgiven him and the villagers. The blonde was never the one to bear grudges and plant hatred in his heart, unlike other people. Hiyashi knew that Neji respected Naruto so much. The two of them were friends and were in all respecting each other like brothers ever since the successful defeat of the Sound and Akatsuki, where they retrieved Uchiha Sasuke and Sabaku no Gaara. Naruto was the one who brought them back safe and sound. Naruto's death on other means would have not affected Neji that much, but to die at his friend's hand is something that he had trouble accepting. It was not that easy for him to see his friend die, especially if that friend died of a betrayal at his own hand. That would kill Neji's spirit, and that was something that was not easy to repair. Hiyashi sighed as he approached Neji, knowing how he would react, but he dared to anyway. Neji stood there not caring about what was going on in his life. His life was dedicated to being free from fate. Naruto had taught him this lesson as the blonde nin defied his own distasteful fate. All that ended when he died by his hands. He felt as if he had not right to live and be here, while Naruto, whom had trusted him and taught him about life and living, lied somewhere else, dead and lifeless, while retaining his innocence as he had lost it to his own blind obedience. Never was there a day that he never regretted what he had done. He should have reasoned with Naruto and told the Hokage first, but instead he obeyed with full support to a council whom he didn't know would ask him to betray his best friend for no good reason. His friend. He appreciated the others' efforts to get him to talk, but there was no way he would, for he believes that he had lost the right to live. Being in Naruto's favorite place was all he needed to remind him of his deeds, but his reminiscing and thoughts' self-punishment was cut off when he felt someone approach. Neji, Hiyashi said as the young Hyuga turned and bowed, which the elder man returned courteously. The two talked as the rest of the team assembled at Ichiraku's correct spelling. This was the favorite place of Naruto when he was alive. It was no wonder that Jiraiya, who was Naruto's teacher and father figure, chose this place to gather. They knew it had an effect on Neji, but the Hyuga rarely talked, if ever he did talk. Tenten looked at her friend and was filled with pity. "It's hard to see Neji like this," Tenten said as she sat a few chairs away from Neji. This drew the attention of two people. "Don't worry about him, Tenten. He will get over it eventually," Guy said as he looked at Hiyashi and Neji speaking. Lee nodded as Jiraiya spoke, alerting them of his presence. "Time heals all wounds that is not meant to be there, but if the wound is intentional it will never heal," Jiraiya said as the former frog Sannin of Konoha arrived with Tsunade at his side. "Ohio Jiraiya-sama." "Tsunade-sama," Guy said as Nins bowed to the two. Jiraiya retained a serious look while Tsunade smiled and greeted them. They were here for the final orders on what they would do once they arrived. "Okay, Team 11. You have the following mission objectives. 1. You are to escort Jiraiya to the village of the Tenchi. Next, you are to deliver this to Kazekage on the way. Kakashi's Team 7 will be on their way to the Tsuchikage with the scroll bearing the news of the meeting. Shino, Kiba, Shikamaru and Choji will head towards the grass with the news of the meeting. Any questions? Tsunade said as Tenten raised her hand. Tsunade-sama, may I ask as to why these particular villagers are being informed and not all of the other villages? Tenten asked while Tsunade looked at Jiraiya, who answered the woman's question. The village of the stone, grass and the sand have good relations with the Tenchi. It would be considered an act of betrayal if we did not inform them of Konoha's dealings with the Tenchi. The Tenshik is persistent with maintaining good relations with its friends. Within proper terms, of course. Jiraiya said as Guy played back Konkuro's remark about the Kazekage. Jiraiya-sama, Konkuro-san said that only those who have permission from a member of the Tenchi are the Kazekage. If that is so, then how will we enter the village? Guy said while Jiraiya frowned a bit as Tsunade shot him a look that said, "You better have an explanation or I will kill you," every second that she looked at him. Unfazed by her glare, Jiraiya answered Guy's question. It's simple. You speak the password and you have a signature from one of the recognized people. Also, as long you are with me, there should be no problem, provided I'm conscious, of course. Jiraiya said as Guy nodded. Hiyashi looked Jiraiya. There was something that was bothering him. He, like any other clan head, did a research on any new village that would come along. They needed to know if any member of that village would become a suitable partner for their children, may it be male or female. According to what he had dug on the Tenchi, they had a person they called Tenshikage. No one outside the village save a select few ever saw the nin leader without his face mask on. The village, according to people, was very safe. Of course there were crimes, but then again they would always get the criminals. What disturbed him was the rumor going around about the village. People said that the village was the nesting grounds for many missing nins. He continued his thoughts as he began the journey home in silence, not noticing the same vendor as before was sitting near them with his items for sale. I hope that Candyman is doing better than. Merchant sighed at the little amount of information he got. He would have to wait for the rest to get their info before he made his delivery and left the village. Sighing from under his straw hat, he hoped that his partners were already done. Unknown to him, his other companion had somehow hit the jackpot. Good. A loud and brash Chunin today. I'll just have to stand here and wipe the dishes while they speak. Candyman thought as he stayed in a restaurant with 4 nins in front of him. One looked very lazy, the other had a large white dog, the other a bug user, and one person that was a tad bit chubby for his own good. He listened as he wiped the dish in front of him. Well, we got a mission to go to the grass village. Yahoo, I bet not even Naruto got this kinds of mission. Kiba said to Shikamaru and the rest of his teammates. The only problem was he was so loud that almost everyone could hear him. Quiet down, Kiba. Hinata won't notice you even though you act like Naruto. Shikamaru said as the dog trainer frowned and sat down, much to Candyman's dismay. Fortunately for him, he hid this and continued in wiping the dish in front of them. Shino looked at his old teammate. He was not stupid. He knew about why he was like that. Hinata had taken Naruto's death so bad that she didn't go on dates with Kiba anymore. Kiba, however, did not want that to continue. So for the past 5 or so years he has been hard at work trying to become like Naruto. But then again, anyone who was around Naruto knew that Kiba was only acting to be like Naruto, while Naruto truly was Naruto. He hoped that his teammate got over this and decided to help Hinata in his own way. He wondered if the other teams were given assignments like they were. In a place some distance away, Shikamaru's guess was right. Team 7 was given a similar mission to them. So we have a similar assignment as Shikamaru-kun's team, Sakura said as she sat with her fiancé Uchiha Sasuke and their superior Junin sensei Kakashi. They were at the Team 7 training grounds when Tsunade informed them about their new mission via messenger, who dashed off at once to carry another message. Team 7, you are to go to village of the stone in Earth Country. There you will deliver an important message to the Tsuchikage, who is a friend of the Tenchi. The letter that you will deliver must arrive there within 2 months. The letter is not to be opened except by the Tsuchikage. Any obstacles are to be removed at once if they even try to hinder your progress. Tsunade's letter said as Sakura read the lines again. Interesting mission. Sakura said excitedly as she was eager to see a new village. One that she hoped was still untouched by the times and the conditions of the outside world. Hi. The village of the Tenshi is a new village. There is relatively very few things that we know about it. We don't even know the name of their cage. Besides, this would make an interesting place to learn a few new things. Ne Sasuke-kun? Kakashi said as the Uchiha smiled while Sakura frowned. Sasuke and Kakashi noticed the frown and gave her a concerned look. Kakashi decided to leave knowing that only Sasuke could help Sakura. Making another lame excuse, he left, leaving a grateful Uchiha who stood beside Sakura as he walked with her towards her house. He waited for her to speak, and much to his relief and his sorrow she did. You know, he always liked to try and learn new things. Naruto, I mean. He was always energetic and happy. It seemed that nothing could take him down. He had lived through hell and become stronger. Even if it has been long, I can still remember the times we had together. They were so full of joy for us, Sakura said as Sasuke groaned. Joy for the two you maybe, but not for me, he thought as he walked beside her. Their relationship was still marred by Sakura's past. She couldn't even put it in her heart to forget him, even thought the young blonde had been gone for a long time. Time and time again he could see Naruto beat him at every turn. From the time that they took the Junin exam together to the day that Sakura finally agreed to be the blonde's girlfriend, much to his anger and jealousy. What drove him even to become angrier was that even in death Naruto seemed to outdo him. It seemed that Sakura would forever hold Naruto close to her heart. Not willing to completely give, he tried something. Sakura, to be fair, Naruto was always and will always be a competent shinobi. Nothing others do or say about him can show us otherwise, but isn't it just right that you bury him in the past? Must you always remember him and not me? Sasuke said, hiding his anger at the blonde's memory with his concern for Sakura, but he was actually concerned that Naruto was the one who was dominant in her heart. Sakura merely bowed her head and waited till she was at her home to speak towards the Uchiha Nin. Sasuke, how can you say that we forget him? We are his friends. True, we cannot live in the past, but that takes time to happen. He taught us long ago that forgiveness comes with time and patience. So does success and love. Did he not live those years of hate and bitterness of Konoha and live to show them what he could do? To those who hated and persecuted him, did he not forgive them over time? Does this not tell you how hard it is to forget a man so noble and so kind? Sorry Sasuke if my walking in the past pains you, but for me it is not easy to forget the pain that I felt for the loss of the one that I love. More so I cannot help but feel hatred towards myself, while I blamed myself at the lack of courage and dedication I showed towards my love. Time and time again he asked my hand in marriage, but my passiveness and my lack of will to sacrifice my life and benefits as a single allowed me to miss my chance to be with him. Tell me now, how can you stand to say that it is so easy when you have not been in love with him? Have you become his love? No, for you only saw him from the distance while I saw him so close to me. No, Sasuke. I cannot and will not forget Naruto. To forget him is to forget the things that I learned from him. That I will not allow. If you cannot stand my memory of him, then stay away, Sasuke. For the memories of things that I have shared with him will always be here with me, forever until I die. Sakura said as she left a brooding Sasuke in front of her home as she entered it without looking at Sasuke. The raven-haired nin just looked angry and took out his frustrations on a nearby trash can, spooking the cat that walked on top of the fence. Damn you, Naruto Dobi, Sasuke thought as he kicked the can out of anger. No matter what he did, he would never be good enough to replace him or do better than Naruto. He walked home, for tomorrow they would begin their mission to the village of stone. Inside someone was crying. Naruto, I miss you, Sakura wailed as she then fell to her bed crying. It seemed the farther and longer Naruto was gone, it seemed the stronger she felt for him. She stopped sobbing as she realized something. Maybe this is what they meant when they said that the longer the person is gone, then the more you will miss them. Sakura was still sobbing as she went to sleep so that she could go to her mission with a clear head. Unknown to them before the mission began, several other teams were being dispatched with different orders. Gai-ran, take one squad of Chunins with you and met with Jiraiya once he enters our territory. They must be watched. We can't afford the loss of an advisor to our village. A man wearing tall white garments said as he pointed to a man who had a large sword with a face that was not seen as he bowed, but he was smiling as he bowed to his commander. Not to mention that his wife and your eldest son would kill you if anything happened to him, Gai-ran said as he smiled under a collection of short and brown hair. His superior just tried to look innocent, but much to his amusement he was not able to. Yeah, that too, he said as Gai-ran stood and left with no knowledge as to what was going to happen, but he would not let that deter him. He wanted to do what he asked of him. He was unaware of what was going on somewhere else. In a mansion that belonged to Orochimaru, the man who was once hailed as the leader of the Sound, a squad of his most trusted men gathered to hear his newest order. Kabuto-kun led 2 squads of Chunins and Junins to attack the envoy to the Kazekage. They must not survive, Orochimaru said. Hi Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto shouted as he turned to signal his squad. Ha, 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 Orochimaru shouted as he laughed his head off while his nins were moving. It seemed that it would finally begin. In some distance away, Kakashi was looking at the memorial made for those who were killed in the line of duty for Konoha. Kakashi looked at the list and focused on his long-dead student. To him there was nothing as sad for a sensei than this kind of situation. To lose one's own student to his own village that he had protected for so long. Naruto was long dead, but something inside of Kakashi told him otherwise. He spoke softly as he stroked the memorial. Are you really dead, Naruto? Kakashi asked as his mind wandered. The wind blew towards the sea where a man was walking in the streets of his village. The man was the leader of the Tenshi. He turned around once he felt the wind pass. He knew what the wind said, but for now he would ignore it and place at the back of his mind for now his village came first. His home and his family were all here in the village where the angels reside. It was a good day for Team 11. They were making good time on their journey to the Kazekage. They had been walking for a few days already. There was no denying that they wanted to reach the village of the sand so that they could rest after a long day of traveling. They were in the woods close to the sand area. That was about a day's travel to Sand Village. While on the way to the village of the sand, everyone was silent. Even the most perverted nin Jiraiya was quiet, even though several women accidentally walked in on him in a co-ed bath. This made Guy curious as to what had happened to Jiraiya. As a nin of Konoha, he was well aware of Jiraiya's reputation as a perverted nin. This was something that he found odd about the man. Like for instance, they passed an all-female bath. He found the frog hermit bathing in the men's section, and when Jiraiya was being seduced by a young and attractive woman, he merely smiled at her and politely refused her offer. But things became really weird when the female wanted to make love to Jiraiya, but once again he calmly and politely refused the woman. His deep thought was interrupted by someone who spoke up. Let's rest here, Jiraiya commanded as he noticed Guy in deep thought. He knew it was about the way he acted. He knew it must be weird for the man, but this was the new Jiraiya. As Neji and Enli set off to find wood for their afternoon break, and Tenten slept a bit since she was more tired than the other two, having the last guard shift last night, Jiraiya sat with his back to a tree. Guy refused to look at him as he sat with his back to the Sennin while facing the place where the fire for their break would be placed, but he spoke instead. Jiraiya-sama, I know it is not my place to ask you, but I am curious, Guy said as the silver-haired nin looked at him. This was the thing he was waiting for Guy to start asking questions. He needed to get this out of the way if either of them would focus on what needed to be done. Yes, what is it, Guy? He said lazily, masking the attention he was giving to the question as his mind wondered what the green-clad Junin would ask first. You seem different, Jiraiya-sama. It seems after your stay in the village of the Tenshi you have gained something. Like a new lease on life, Guy said while Jiraiya frowned a bit. Got to think my answer thoroughly. I don't want him to discover anything he shouldn't know. Jiraiya thought as he gave Guy a safe answer. There are things that one finds in life that are more important than the other. Sometimes we need to give up something to earn another. Although often it is difficult, it is something that we have to do if we truly wish to change. I sacrificed my old life for a new one. The price I paid was less than what was given to me, for I earned 3 times more than what I bargained for. Jiraiya said as he smiled while he lowered his head as the smell of sweet rose and summer flower filled his nostrils. Guy didn't look at the frog hermit as the younger Nin asked another one as if he was trying to find out something. What if the price of what you pay is not worth it? Guy asked as the green spandex Nin got Yirjia's curiosity. I wonder what Guy wants, Jiraiya thought as he noticed that Guy was probing for something. Yes, there is that chance, but then again that risk is always there. One cannot live without it and it will forever be in this world. All that we can do is hope for the best and then move forward. Nothing in this world has zero risk in it. In every choice that we make there is a consequence and we will never know the consequence till we try. Jiraiya said as he remembered how hard it was for him to make his decision. He remembered how heavy the choice was and how her eyes tore him from sanity and into a world of craziness that was too hard to live in, but every time he looked at her his heart jumped and leapt mountains. At first he regretted his choice, but as time went on their lives became intertwined and they lived together with their little flower growing in between them. He hid the contented smile he had on his face as he recalled those he loved. Arigato, Jiraiya-sama, Guy said as the Nin closed his mouth. Both of them suddenly stood up to see Neji and Lee return with some wood for the fire. Jiraiya saw that Guy was looking at Neji with pity. He knew what Guy wanted. You truly are a good teacher, Guy, Jiraiya thought as he put the pieces together. Guy did not ask the questions for his own sake, but for the sake of his student who was known to everyone to be in a bad state. He wanted to see if there was any chance that Neji would be healed if he stayed in the village of the Tenchi. Guy wanted to give his student a chance to get well and get over things. His thoughts were confirmed as Guy spoke to him after the green-clad Junin sat closer to him while still looking at Neji and thinking. Neji, there must be some way to help you, Guy thought. That was why he asked the frog Sennin in the first place. He wanted to know if there was any way for Neji to snap out of this state. He spoke once again to Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sama, the only thing that could get Neji to snap out of this state is the ghost of Naruto himself. Only he can give Neji forgiveness that he needs and break him out of his self-made prison. Guy said, unaware of the thoughts of the silver-haired Sannin as he hid his smile. Oh, he'll get something else much better than that, Jiraiya thought while the rest just went on their duties and he lied down on the round. His happiness and amusement did not go unnoticed, however. I wonder why Jiraiya-sama seems so happy, Ikagata Tenten thought as she now sat close to the fire after she had woke up. She had only gotten a glimpse of the smile the frog Sannin had managed to hide, but when she noticed that only he was smiling, she immediately became worried. If Guy-sensei said something which he seemed serious about, then something in that sentence made Jiraiya-sama seem amused. Perhaps Guy-sensei mentioned something about Tsunade-sama? I'll find out later, Tenten thought as she went to her duties while the frog Sannin in turn looked at her out of the corner of his eye. He knew what she was thinking and that she was planning to ask him about what he and Guy had talked about. You wanted to know what your sensei said to me, right? Jiraiya asked as Tenten came close to him and stopped when he spoke. She could only nod, but Jiraiya denied her the answer she sought. When Guy thinks he should share the answer with you, he will share it with you. For now, however, let us leave it at that, Jiraiya said as he continued to rest, leaving a curious Tenten. Somewhere else a certain group of nins were receiving their orders from their team leader. Our duty is to deal with the Tenchi ambassador to the sand and his escorts. A group of leaf nins called Team Guy. The commander replied as he let the wind brush his silver hair aside while he moved to the sand at high speed with his squad. His subordinates wanted to clear out and outline the mission so that they would know what to do, but it was not out of bravery did they do this. Is he going to be there, Kabuto-sama? A sound nin asked with fear evident in his voice. The team leader did not answer until they landed on the branch of a tree. Your cowardice, despite our 2 squads, is not needed tonight, for he is not going to be there. He will stay in his village as we conduct this mission, Kabuto said, freeing his subordinates of their fear of the one that had decimated the sound. He was the only person that could drive fear into any sound shinobi excluding Orochimaru. Kabuto could not deny that he too was afraid. Imagine someone who could barely do a basic Bunshin no Jutsu before could now do a full-blown Kaiten Karyu Enden with very little effort, which wiped out a large number of sound nins. Ever since then, no other sound nin dared to enter the Tenshi territory. They only did dare go against them because they too feared Orochimaru's wrath. I wonder who will be escorting him to the Suna? Kabuto wondered as he continued with his mission, while unsuccessfully trying to make the memory of his squad's death disappear. Even he felt the fear that the man's presence gives of every time he stands in front of them. Somewhere else, a group of nins were making their way into Earth Country via a shortcut through Wind Country and then head towards the Grass Village after entering Earth Country. Their Junin leader sighed as he watched the scene in front of him. They were looking at a couple of Konoha merchants traversing the path to the Suna. Why didn't go with Guy's team? Kiba wondered, knowing that there was a fast path through Wind Country to Earth Country. For a day or so now they were traversing almost the same path that Guy and his team went on. He wondered why they had to take different paths instead of going together. You're a bit dense, aren't you, Kiba? You don't let an emissary go with a group like this. It would conflict with your duties, Shikamaru pointed out. He reasoned that the caravan was also part of their mission. If they were to combine the 2 teams' mission, they would be torn between protecting their VIP and doing their duties for the sake of their people. They didn't like either one of them being left behind to suffer just for the other. He is right, Kiba-kun, Hinata said as the dog boy shut up. He didn't want to risk losing her affection. He just went on to check his Chunin vest. Unlike earlier, all of them were wearing their standard uniforms except for Shino, who wore a white jacket and a pair of shades. As Shino looked at Hinata, he noticed something peculiar. The young Hyuga heiress had changed over the years. She wore a Chunin uniform resembling the one that Kiba's sister wore. She wore the one with cuts on the leg to reveal her thighs and a Chunin vest of hers. She now was more confident about herself. It seemed Naruto's death had inspired her to become herself and do what she wanted to do rather be something that others wanted her to do. Around her there was a mixture of sadness and regret in the air. Regret that she never fought for the one that she loved, and sadness at no longer being able to see him or hear him ever again. Shino always wondered what the world would be like if Naruto suddenly disappeared, and now he knew the answer. It was silence, complete and utter silence that was deafening to their ears. Who knew that one person could change the lives of so many? Shino wondered as he looked at Hinata, who was having her own inner turmoil. Naruto-kun, I promise you that I will be true to myself and others. I will not try to hide anything from them, she promised to herself as they walked towards their destination, unaware of what was going on elsewhere. Gai-ran-sama, we are coming close to the village of stone. Should we try to restock while we're there? The Tenshi nin asked as they their way into Earth Country. The entire rescue team was in a hurry to get to the sand before anyone from the remaining sound came assaulted their ambassadors group that was traversing the village of the sand. They knew that they would be outnumbered by the sound if they were to engage them, but one entire team was all that could be spared since their nin numbers were too small to send more than one team out into the field. Yes. When we reach Earth Country, then we will take a day to restock and rest. The rest of the days we will start running and heading towards the village of the sand at the fastest speed that we can muster, Gai-ran said, while the other nins understood and said nothing, but a nod of understanding, stating that there was going to be no argument from them. They knew that Gai-ran was no fool in the terms of war. A force unready was just as bad as a force so little. They will likely send multiple teams against us, probably 2 or so, Gai-ran thought, knowing that they would be in for a fight with some number of unknown shinobi. He smiled at the challenge. He tried to hide the smile, but his second-in-command noticed it. Oh shit. I know that smile. Guy Ron-sama smiles like that only when we're about to wipe another enemy unit and nuke just a normal set of enemies. Most likely we're going to be outnumbered. The nin leader thought as he imagined the type of fight they would be in for. He looked at his men who finally saw the smile and sighed. Yep, it's definitely going to be a day's work for him and a rather long day for us. The Tenshi Anbu thought as he trailed behind their commanding officer. He didn't notice the now serious expression on Guy Ron's face. Yukito, wait for me boy. Guy Ron thought as he sped up he didn't want anyone to reach him before he did. In the village of the sand an entire Junin squad was outside and on the roofs of one of the sand's houses. They were annoyed. For the past hour they were watching over someone on orders from the Kazekage, but why he did not know. However they knew to disobey the Kazekage meant extreme punishment from their Kazekage. Preferring to keep quiet the Junin team watched at a safe distance as their subject came out with his golden blonde hair visible from where they were. Despite their doubts they were going to protect the boy with all their lives for an order was an order. In the morning as the sun broke the silence for the dawn, Inuzuka Kiba was severely shocked when he was suddenly thrown out of his bed towards the doorway. In his anger he and the now large Akamaru tried to attack the person who woke them only to be bonked on the head by Shikamaru. Wake up doofus. It's 4 a.m. and the sun's up earlier than expected. Shikamaru said to Kiba as he left Shino in charge to wake Kiba up if he decides to fall asleep again while he proceeded to have an audience with the Tsuchikage in the planning room. Inside he found the Tsuchikage with a little white ferret on his shoulder. Tsuchikage-sama, please forgive the delay, but Shikamaru began, but was cut off by the Tsuchikage who suddenly looked distressed as a second later a fully clothed and fed team of Tenshi Anbu led by Guy Ron entered the room ready for movement and mobilization. Sorry, but we must keep our introductions and apologies for later. The Tsuchikage said interrupting Shikamaru who with the rest that was already assembled looked at the distressed look that he sported as he marked a straightforward route to the Suna village cutting their travel time by several hours.
Really Tsuchikage-sama, judging by the way you have marked the map it seems that we are to leave for the Suna immediately. Guy Ron said looking at the map that was there on the table with a long line of marbles marking the straight line that they would take towards the Suna. The Tsuchikage nodded while in his cage robes.
Yes, according to my friend here. The Tsuchikage gestured to his old ferret friend, Itachi, whom he sent to follow the sound nins who were gathering supplies.
Kabuto, who is the leader of the Sound Nin infiltration and assassination squad bound for the Suna, has just decided to speed up their timetable. Apparently 2 of their nins had spotted the Hyuga accompanying you and decided to trail you where the presence of the Konoha nins covered the presence of the Sound nins in which they were able to determine the presence of the Tenshi shinobis. They depart at exactly 5 am, the Tsuchikage said as he looked at the map.
According to Itachi, the entire sound unit is stationed here inside the waterfall wherein lies a discreet exit cutting their travel time by 12 hours if they can cross it. The Tsuchikage said as he prodded on a small location of the map following a river that directly curves around the borders of Wind Country. Naturally Kabuto would place explosive tags or traps in that area in case of intruders. Guy Ron said as he and Shikamaru gave their inputs. So we will cut our travel time by at least an hour behind the sound nins rather than just 12 hours if went on the straight line that you dotted for as Tsuchikage-sama. Shikamaru added as Guy Ron disagreed. No, Nara-san. The cave itself is not a straight line. There are many curves and they shouldn't be able to move as freely as we can sense by my guess that the size of the caves proves to be difficult to maneuver through. It's probably very small. Guy Ron said as the Tsuchikage agreed to his thoughts. True, it is difficult to maneuver through these caves, but the time travel nonetheless will be cut by at least 10 hours despite that. The other reason and the only most probable reason that they are going to use these caves is because they're inside the cave they can't be spotted, which is wrong since animals like Itachi here see everything yet are ignored by most people. The Tsuchikage mentioned while he allowed Itachi to sleep on his shoulder. Both squad commanders would be in deep thought for a few seconds before they came up with an idea. We leave exactly an hour after 5, Shikamaru said as Guy Ron continued. So that they won't suspect a leak if ever. Then we should be able to arrive there sometime before they do and then get ourselves some rest, and after that, when they arrive they are dead meat to us and our forces, Guy Ron finished. The teams then moved to gather their things, and much to Shikamaru's annoyance he told his team that they would be leaving earlier than expected. Hinata took it well, but decided to leave once Shikamaru decided to deal with Kiba, who began whining since they were leaving earlier. While she was walking she bumped into Guy Ron and his squad. "Welcome Guy Ron senpai." Hinata greeted courteously as Guy Ron motioned for his men to inspect their belongings. The leader went in front of Hinata and greeted with equal respect. "Anyo Guy Ron senpai, how is life the village of the Tenchi?" Hinta began striking a conversation with the Tenchi nin. "Please don't call me that, Hinata-san. Just call me Guy Ron," the brown-haired man replied while trying to be polite. "Gomen Guy Ron-san, but can you please tell me how life is like in the village of the Tenchi?" Hinata asked, curious about the lives of others outside of Konoha. But unfortunately she could not, as Shikamaru entered with a rather annoyed, but ready Kiba while Shino stood behind him equally ready. "I think it would be best if we continue this conversation after the mission, Hinata-san. Sayonara for now, but duty calls," the Tenchi nin said as he bowed and moved to his team. When both teams were already, their leaders lead the teams to their paths as they hoped they would be able to reach there on time as others hurried to their tasks. "Hey Sasuke-kun. Move fast," Haruno Sakura, Chunin of the Leaf, shouted to her husband who was behind Kakashi as she sprinted to the village of the grass in excitement to get her mission done. Kakashi was glad to see his only female student move cheerfully, as she had lost a man that she had deeply loved. It was a good thing that now at least she would have a reason to smile. Unknown to her, she would be meeting someone who would disturb the life of someone she cared about. "To-san, hurry up," a little girl with neat short black hair in a kimono shouted to her father, who was busy along with her older brother, who was 5 years old and was Kenji's best friend, carrying all the things that they had been shopping for. Her mother only laughed at her husband and her son as her red eyes looked jovially at the father and son. The two, however, did not share the same amusement that the two carried for the situation. "Ka-chan, this isn't funny. I can barely see with all the clothes that you have shopped for," the little boy with brown hair shouted. At this the father maneuvered his hand to smack the boy behind his head. "That is no way to talk to your mother, young man," the father shouted as the boy whined about slave labor, as his mother and his sister laughed as the father lectured the son about how much a man should do for the woman that he loves. The two other women laughed as they approached a rather popular restaurant in the village of the grass. Unknown to the men, the mother and wife looked at a locket with the shape of a heart. The little girl beside her thought it was a picture of her father and her mother, but had she been taller she would have seen that inside held a younger picture of her mother and a man with silver hair and an eye patch over his right eye. As the woman closed the locket she glanced at her husband. She wondered when the time was right if she would choose him over her previous love. She wondered how would she feel like without him by her side as he always was, but more importantly, did she feel anything for him? For now she was happy and content at having him by her side. "Come on, you two." The mother motioned as her husband smiled, but inside he felt a bit disappointed and worried about the relationship between him and his wife. He was no fool, but he would deal with it when she was ready. He never could understand his wife. There were times that they simply loved each other, but then there were times when they would dislike each other, although it's her most of the time that hated him. Inside of his wife he felt that there was extreme hatred towards him, that he was nothing more than a replacement and that she was only using him as a temporary crutch. Still he had hoped and believed in the words that she had said to him, that she loved him, that he was the most important thing in her life, that he was her joy, life and sadness, and he was her center and the existence that continued to help her exist. For now he smiled with his children as they left for the barbecue restaurant. When the family had left, the team from Konoha passed by the same spot as two people who once loved each other did not feel the presence of the other, as they recognized something that they should have a long time ago. They had somehow moved on and forgotten their old lives, but not fully. While two people tried to bury the past. Kakashi-sensei, who are we going to meet? Sakura asked, not having to the grass that many times. She wondered what kind of people she and her team would meet. Hey guys, sorry if I am late by 2 chapters already. I still need to make a few adjustments to Jiraiya's life. I am also working on the roles of some of the other characters mentioned before to make sure that their roles are melded into the story and don't. The way May 5th was my birthday, so I am feeling older now. I also reloaded the first editing of chapter 6. There are still some errors in this chapter since I wasn't able to edit it correctly. That I'll fix and reload with chapter 6 and 8 that is already in progress. Waking to see you. It had been days since their travel from the village of Stone, and Hyuga Hinata was tired. As they slowly waited for the morning, they slept one last time before they would have to face the Sound Nins tomorrow. To tell the truth, she was eager. It was the sound that had taken her Naruto from her and denied her the one and single joy in her life. For Naruto she would fight her best. As she stood, she saw Guy Ron sitting by his bed staring at the direction of Suna, which was a half a day's travel ahead. She decided to talk to him before they set out to the Suna. Guy Ron sat there and contemplated and wondered. It had been a long travel, and by his estimate they should have met up with Sound Nins today and this morning. Given the estimation of the Tsuchikage on how long ahead they would be, something he was not right. He lost track of his thoughts when he saw the Hyuga heiress come his way. For now he hoped that they had not found a way for them to get ahead. He also hoped that remnants of the old wars were no longer present to help them. If not, they would have to move within 3 hours to get to the Suna in time. He stopped as he saw the female Hyuga move close to him. For now he abandoned his thoughts as he turned as to what would happen now. "Ohio Guy Ron-san. What troubles you?" Hinata asked the Tenchi Nin as she sat down in front of him. The Nin merely smiled, a smile that was there to assure her, but she knew that there was something that troubled him. "Nothing, Hyuga-san. It is just that something is not right and that I should do something about it. But there is another factor that we have yet to consider," he said as the Hyuga's curiosity was taken. Although she was curious, she decided to live it up to him and Shikamaru as a sign of trust. Changing the discussion, they began talking what it was like in the village of the Tenchi. Hinata had gone first, describing the beauty of Konoha's trees and the great forest that surrounded their village. She had said that the people were warm and friendly as much as they could. Guy Ron knew that this meant, "Those bastards are judgmental, you mean?" Guy Ron thought as he began describing his home.
He described to her the smell of the sea as it rode with the wind, filling the nostrils of those who willingly inhale it as it fills their breath with coolness and calmness. He described the people with smiles that could disarm opponents if need be. Hinata was glad to hear about such pleasant people, and it seemed to interest her how he described the smell of the sea in relation to the people of the village of the Tenchi.
"What a beautiful way of describing your village, Guy-san. It makes one wish that she was in your village." Hinata contemplated as she looked at the sand. She then sensed something from the Suna village as Guy Ron stood to rouse the rest from their slumber. "Die!" Baki shouted as the elderly Sand Junen ripped an Auto Nin in half with K's no Yeba. He looked around and grimaced. He saw several Suna Nins dead. The damn Sound Nins had managed to force most of their shinobis to leave the village with a false attack by the Sound. It was late that they discovered that there were just 2 full squads of Chunins and at least 3 Junins with them, one of which was their old friend Kabuto. "Damn, and the Kazekage hasn't even arrived yet," Baki growled as several of the 3 Chunin squads that remained arrived, each bringing a report of their situation.
"Baki-sama, we cannot find any trace of the other Oto Nins. It appears that they had forced our men far into the desert with an old trick of the old Oto and Tenchi wars. Apparently it was the last one that the Sound had, since all of the rest were destroyed along with the unburned ones," a Chunin reported. Baki snorted. He remembered this trick. It was a scroll with a large amount of chakra placed into it. Once the person concentrated his thoughts into it, he would be able to produce one of the most believable illusions ever. Few would ever know about the illusion until it was too late, that the entire army was drawn into the real army after it had attacked the other from behind.
It was one of the tricks that the Tenchi had learned to overcome, by creating their own illusions. It caused in its earlier uses several hundred casualties to the sound, but the time came where they made a better way around, but they refused to share it with the other villages, being a village secret and all. How he wished right now they knew how to counter it. His thoughts continued as he motioned the Chunins to follow him while the Kazekage himself was in the desert, annoyed at the entire situation. Move up. We are finding a better position to rest, then we start heading back. Konkuro, take charge. Gaara ordered as he began motioning his sand to bring him back to the Suna. It was fortunate that the sand could aid him in his travels along the desert, making less tired than others when traveling on the desert. Thus he had enough strength to make it bake to defend the little one. Konkuro looked at his brother and then approached him. What is it, Gaara? Is it Yukito? Konkuro asked as the Kazekage did not turn to him, but spoke. Yes, he needs me, Konkuro. I promised Temari that I would protect him no matter the cost. Stay here and lead them back once they've been rested. I'll be waiting for you. Gaara said as his sand brought him back to the Suna village as fast as possible. Inside he hoped that they had yet to reach the boy. Find that boy now, Kabuto shouted as he and the 7 remaining men made their motion to find the child. They had searched and encountered 3 squads of nins as they searched for the child. Fortunately enough, 2 of them had managed to go past them and ignore their presence, while the third one had to be dealt with. As a result, they had managed to waste an hour to rest up and regain their lost strength. The only other place that they had yet to search, the Kazekage Tower, and that was where they were heading to now. Unknown to them, a rather alluring and beautiful black-haired woman ran to the roof with a little blonde boy and little white-haired girl in her arms, along with the Suna Anbu that were left to protect them. As she ran, she touched the ring her husband had given her, and at once in a distance far away a group that was forgotten and ignored up until no made their move, leaping in large distances to speed the arrival. The woman stood at the edge and waited. If they arrived, she would not let them touch her, but her death would mean that she would be able to send both children running, as she cushioned the fall with her body and her death. An hour later, the Auto Nins arrived and they saw that the woman holding their target was surrounded by Suna Anbu. As they planned their assault, they knew that the Anbu knew that they were being watched. There was not way they would not know it. By now the woman had probably been encircled, but they had the numbers to get the job done. When the signal began, Kabuto's men moved. While in the desert, Shikamaru was having problems as they met up with Gaara. With Gaara's help, the Nins were moving towards the Suna village at a faster pace while expending less energy. They talked about how they would deal with the situation. By now they should have found Yukito and Lady Kasumi's daughter Kodomi. By the time we arrive there and head to the tower, she may be dead as well as the children. Guy Ron pointed out as Shikamaru nodded. The best thing we can do now is avenge them. Shikamaru thought as he silently cursed himself for not remembering that during the Shinobi Wars several secret roads were made towards the Suna. One of them exited in a dune that they had just passed several minutes ago. Gaara saw his expression and understood. Do not blame yourself, Shikamaru-san. Not everyone can know everything. So is there nothing that we can do? Gaara said while Shikamaru shook his head, but Guy Ron had a crazy idea that he told the 2 of his plan. Gaara agreed, but Shikamaru protested. That is just plain crazy. Shikamaru protested to Guy Ron's plan, but Guy Ron would not let himself be convinced otherwise. There is no other choice, but we will have to wait till we are at the exact position that I mentioned. Guy Ron began getting Gaara's full support. I concur. Right now we have very little choices left. It seems that your Tenchi Anbu code is true to you and your fellow Anbu's personality. Does it not? Gaara finalized as while Guy Ron smiled a maniac-like grin as he spoke out loud. Who dares? Guy Ron began as his men answered with an enthusiastic response. Wins. The Tenchi men shouted as several minutes ahead of them a rather large frog with a blue overall kimono and a small blade made one last jump before he would land in the village of the Suna. While on the roof, Kabuto watched his men falter against the woman. The woman in front of him was amazing as she used one hand wielding a naginata while holding 2 children with the other. What she lacked in ninja skills she more than made up with the skill of her weapon. Kasumi moved with grace as she pierced the spear into the heart of an enemy and then used the blunt end to knock the other off the roof to fall to the ground as the nin screamed. She spun her blade over her head as she injured one more that tried to jump on her. Another threw shurikens at her the moment that she did that, but she brought her spinning blade in front of her to deflect them. "I won't let you bastards take me or the children without a fight," Kasumi shouted as she brought her spear to a battle stance. She would stand and fight and wait for him. He was her love and she had faith that he would arrive on time to save her. At distance about an hour ago, a young boy was running with a little pet puppy on his head. He watched with excitement as a figure of a gigantic frog with a pipe in its mouth passed directly above him. As the frog leapt away, the boy found it curious it would go in that direction. His father had told him that the direction westward of their home would lead to the village of Suna if walked for an entire day. He had seen the smoke that revealed where the frog had come from, and he also knew that frogs needed water in order to survive, and in the desert of Suna, even though he knew that the frog could reach or leave in less than 10 leaps, he did not notice, however, its passengers. 3 of who came from a village where an angel was born, and the other is a man who found his heart in the most bizarre of places. It was a bright sunny day in the land where the grass grew like the people who inhabited the land. There were 3 people that were walking down the busy streets, not bothering to avoid the number of people that were amassed throughout the entire village. Although they were tasked to deliver a letter to the grass leader, they did not hide their presence and they did not bother to conceal anything from the ninjas that they knew were watching them. They knew that had they done so, they would have been suspected of evil intentions. This would ruin their chance at meeting the grass leader. As they left the market section of the village, they stood there in front of 2 squads of grass junins. One had a set of green-colored hair stretching from her head to her shoulders. The woman was wearing the traditional clothes of a ninja. Their green flak jackets and their grass headbands with symbols stood out as each of them stood there observing the Konoha shinobis away from the prying eyes of the people. "I am Hasame Izumi. You will tell me why you have entered our village or you will suffer the consequences of your actions," Izumi commanded. She knew that their intentions were not hostile, but she could not afford to be complacent in her duties. This was her home, and as is expected of her, she would protect it at all cost. She continued her thoughts as she saw a pink-haired woman came to the front to answer her. "I am," the woman began, but was interrupted by another woman. "Haruno Sakura, medic nin of Konoha and student to the legendary Sanin Tsunade, who is both the Hokage and the greatest medic of all time, and whom I believe now assumes the name Uchiha Sakura," a voice shouted as someone came from behind the grass nins. This time it was a blonde-haired woman whose face was covered along with her hair. All that she could see from behind the woman's covers were a pair of lucid blue eyes. Her clothes were placed in such a way that it covered her entire body yet gave her enough room to breathe. Only her eyes and her hair could ever be seen, yet her hair itself isn't that revealed, as only a few blonde strands of hair could be seen. Kakashi was now worried. The woman in front of them knew everything about them, yet they did not know anything about the woman or where she had come from. His worry came from the fact that she could be a spy from the Oto's remaining forces under Orochimaru. But there was still something else that bugged him about the woman. He remembered seeing a pair of eyes like those years ago on his former student. He could not shake the thought that this woman could be related to him. Sasuke himself seemed to recognize some similarities between his former teammate and the woman, but he was somewhat convinced that this woman did not come from any other hidden village. He could neither see a marking or a symbol on her, and even if he had activated his Sharingan, he was positive he would find no trace of chakra on her. If she was, then she would have been a fool to travel here alone. She would have at least several other bodyguards with her if she was from a ninja village. As the trio looked at her, Kanade spoke. "Thank you, my friend, and would mind telling me of their intentions?" Hasame asked her friend in covers. She nodded as she responded with a slight nod.
"They are here to seek an audience with the Council of Grass Village while their other teams are helping out Jiraiya-sama as we speak. They wish to speak of deals and alliances, which I doubt they can back up without us behind them," the woman answered, aware of the feeling of mistrust and doubt that the trio had towards her. Thank you, and now my Konoha guest let us discuss as a member of the council and as shinobi of the grass with the others about alliances and proposals. Hasame replied as the grass shinobi escorted them, but they did not take of their eyes from the woman that exposed their mission before they were able to say it. Village of Suna, Kazekage Tower. In Suna, the Oto Nins were amazed as a woman fought with her naginata with great skill. Not even their best ninja skills could get to her, and Orochimaru had specific orders to bring the boy back. It was also considering that an young boy was beside her as she carried another little girl with the same jet black hair she had. What made this woman most unique is the unusual blue eyes that she had. Very few black-haired women shared her eyes. They watched with amazement as her graceful figure moved and twisted to counter their every move. As they climbed the tower of the Kazekage, their other comrades engaged the remaining sand shinobis that she had summoned on the roof to distract them while she herself made it here. The fear and unease inside of her greatened when she saw the Oto Nins kill Hakimu and Heitu, her Suna bodyguards. She knew there and then she must not give up. Hope existed for her, for all she had to do was climb up the Kazekage tower and wait for him. He was her husband, and she knew for a fact that he would come and save her. He was her love as he was hers. She would not give up either herself or the children. It would either be death or salvation. As she reached the top, her blue robe swayed a bit in the wind, but it was only for a second. The moment she was on top of the Kazekage tower with the children, she could see the village as it loomed below her. She stood at the edge as a white-haired man appeared.
Surrender, Lady Kasumi. You have tired us, and we would be in need of entertainment after this. We do not wish to tire ourselves any longer, Kabuto remarked, pointing out the lustful eyes his men were giving her.
He wondered how much she could take before her mind broke. His thoughts were broken as a set of shurikens arrived, killing 3 of his men. Now only 4 were left with him. He looked to see several men in black and Konoha shinobis coming from above as Gaara finished catapulted them upwards with his sand. To make matters worse, a large tongue of a frog appeared, causing them to separate. You will regret the day you laid eyes on my wife. A man shouted as Kabuto turned to see Jiraiya standing there with his black outfit standing out against his long white hair as the other Oto Nins caught up and as the other Tenchi Nins they begin their clash. Kabuto fought with his wits as he fought the legendary Sannin Jiraiya. He began his seals for the Charka scalpel, but it was useless as the Sannin beat him to it to perform his own jutsu.
The only way to get out is, he thought as he eyed a corpse of a dead fellow Oto Nin. Kuchiyose summoning no jutsu. Jiraiya shouted as a large frog suddenly appeared along with the other previous one and then in unison grabbed Kabuto with their tongues, only to see the Oto Nin's face give way, showing that it was none other than another shinobi corpse being controlled by Kabuto. Ron cursed under his breath. Killing Kabuto was one of greatest goals in life, as well as Kabuto's greatest goal was to kill him. We will meet one more time, Ron, and next time we'll settle this, Kabuto thought as he raced away, while the other swordsman was having the same thoughts. However, at that time the others were all having a good time at the expense of a certain frog summoner. You idiot! You womanizing pig! I wonder why I shouldn't turn you into a barbecue. The woman shouted at the Sannin, who could only whimper at her ferocity, while the rest of the Nins, Konoha, Suna and Tenchi were laughing at their expense. Ha 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 ha. The great arrow Sannin, whipped by his wife, Ron laughed out when her rejoined them as the rest laughed with him, while the Konoha jaws opened wide with shock. Well, except for Shikamaru anyway, who just managed to let his eyes grow wide. Jiraiya-sama, thou hast found a mate, Guy shouted while he looked at Jiraiya's rather beautiful wife. There was nothing as shocking than when the Konoha Nins found out that Jiraiya had a daughter which he named Shikiku. Daddy, did you bring us some gifts? The little girl squealed as her parents stopped fighting and decided quiet down at Guy's reaction. The Sannin smiled and gave his little daughter a new book to read, while to his wife went a beautiful silver necklace shaped like fire. Everyone smiled a happy smile, heck, even Neji smiled. You have great smile, mister. A little voice said as no one noticed him except Neji, who bent down with a smile to the boy. Arigato for your attention, little one. You see, I have had little to smile about these past few years, Neji said as he bent down to speak to the boy. The rest of his teammates were surprised when they saw that Neji was freely talking to the boy without his recognition of the boy was. Don't worry. There's always a bright star in the night according to my father. What is your name, by the way, mister? Blonde-haired little boy said while Neji smiled unconsciously and ruffled the boy's hair. Arigato. My name, by the way, is Neji. What's yours? Neji asked as Jiraiya and the rest turned too late as the boy answered Neji's question. Hey guys, here's one half of this chapter. The reason is that I am trying to hurry up with pairings of water and fire to get things moving to the start of the story. Don't worry, the next half should be done soon. Seeing dead people walk again. Parta. This is bad, Shikamaru thought as he looked at the situation. He, Kiba, Hinata and the rest of Team Guy were surrounded. But to make it worse was that Neji was being berserker, only he was restrained by Lee and Guy, who in turn only had Tenten available to fight. Let me go. He's alive. Tell me where he is. Neji shouted as the Suna nins and even the Tenshi nins surrounded him and the rest of the Konoha nins. One wrong move and it would end in error, but he could not help it. For years he had lived with the guilt of his friend on his conscience. However, here was the one chance that he had to free himself from this guilt, and now he found he was being restrained from doing so by Konoha's allies. However, with the discovery of the young Yukito's full name, he knew it. No other person could convince Jiraiya-sama, the Sannin of Konoha, to just turn over to another country. It had to be someone special or else it would never happen. Also to Neji, he saw that Jiraiya-sama valued his students and in each of them he taught them all that he knew. Neji, calm down. You'll just make things worse, Guy shouted as he and Lee restrained Neji. He could understand Neji's feelings, but he would hurt his only chance of ridding himself of his guilt if acted this way. Sorry, that is information that we cannot reveal, Guy Ron said, finally speaking up after a few minutes. He had to wait for Lady Kasumi to take the children down to rest with 2 squads of Suna shinobis before he bothered speaking to them. He reminded himself to thank Jiraiya-sama for putting the children to sleep immediately while going with them downstairs. Please, Guy Ron-san, tell us where Naruto-kun is, Hinata shouted with plea in her voice. For years his death had haunted her. Now it was her chance to see him again, and this time she swore that no pink-haired girl would go near an inch of him, even if it meant to kill her. Damn you, Naruto, Kiba thought while he stood beside Hinata watching the front while Shikamaru watched the rear with Tenten. He didn't mind Naruto being alive, but the situation they were in was because he chose to hide himself for this long. However, there was one question lingering in Kiba's mind. He reminded himself to ask Naruto that after he hit him in face for getting them into this situation. Once again, I am sorry, but Out Village's safety as well as the safety of its allies and friend will be placed in jeopardy. That is not something neither us or the Suna can allow to happen, Guy Ron said while making Shikamaru draw his breath in. He's with your village, isn't he? Why else would you guys come here to save that boy? Shikamaru noticed as Guy Ron smiled. There were few details that could skip such an intelligent man like Shikamaru, and what Yukito resembled was uncanny to Shikamaru. He knew the boy may have a different hairstyle, but I know immediately that the boy was Naruto's son, but I needed some way to actually confirm it. Thankfully Neji did that for me. Naruto's Tenshikage too, ain't he? Shikamaru asked him while Guy Ron just smiled and nodded. Naruto is leader of the village of the Tenshi? Was the thought on everyone's head as each of them. Even Neji calmed down once he heard that. He remembered something that Jiraiya had told him and his team before, so he calmed down. Unfortunately, Guy Ron knew what was going on in his mind. You think you will get to see him, won't you? Well, sorry to disappoint you, but due to the complication, he won't be talking to you on a personal level. Only business talk, and even so we'll be around to limit his interaction with you, Guy Ron said. But Neji calmed himself down and remembered that they would still meet, if not on a personal level, at least it would elevate his soul to see him alive. At least tell me he does not hate me, Neji said in a low voice only heard by Guy and Lee. The fellow teammate felt glad that his friend was slowly returning back and soon they would see Naruto, and he hoped that his good friend would once again be the energetic person he once cared for. Guy, however, was glad that soon a long and buried burden would finally be let go. They both knew that all they needed was for Naruto and Neji to speak again. If they did that, then they knew he would be lifted from his burden, although they were concerned that Neji would soon sink into a deeper depression if he found out that Naruto hated him. Thankfully, however, someone else spoke for them. He does not hate you, but however there is something I would like to ask in his stead. Gaara spoke as he appeared up on the roof with the rest. He then stood in front of the group. Neji looked at him with rather expectant look at him. He knew this would be his only chance, and no matter the chance of destroying the only chance he had and even the good relationship of Suna and Konoha, he would risk it. Personally, he had enough of serving a council of the village that had forced him to that fate. He tried to remember, but he again refused. He would not let that past smear his chance like this right now. So now, with a mind bent on self-redemption, he dared. Only if you allow me to talk to him personally, and I mean just the two of us. Neji demanded with a voice of conviction as the rest stood their ground, surprised that Neji would agree to something like that. There was no way that they should be keeping this kind of information from anyone from Konoha, especially from the Hokage. Guy and Lee were surprised at what Neji had said, that they had let go of him to allow everyone to see him stand to look at Gaara while he wore his Junin uniform he had always worn. It had been days, but now he finally noticed that he had kept wearing his uniform for the past few years rather than his standard clothing. He didn't mind that as he stood in front of Gaara waiting for an answer. "Done," was all Gaara said as the Tenshi Nins looked at him with surprise, while Guy-ran made it a point to talk to him later on. While in the grass, Kakashi's team had a rather surprising encounter.